didn't think it would be possible for Hokuzonu to top chapter 71 for me personally. That chapter hit such a tender spot in my heart that I put it within the top 3 chapters of this series for me personally. Hokuzonu apparently was listening in and he wanted to say, hold my beer, because chapter 72 dropped a couple of days ago and I'm now thinking that chapter 71, 72 and maybe a couple from the early on within the series might be the best within the series, probably until he drops next in the next 2 weeks. Because where chapter 71 served to deepen the lore for Iori, Samura and Inori, showing us the trials and tribulations they all endured and the hand that they were dealt, Samura coming to terms with being the sole parent of Iori and much more, chapter 72 served to almost completely recontextualize our understanding of the series for many major events: Chihiro's goals, Samura's goals, the Kaminabi's goals, and more importantly the goings on of what happened on Shukaku all those years ago. And let me tell you, it wasn't a good time. So let's talk in this chapter here. So we're just going to take it from the top and work down. This chapter picks up where chapter 71 left off, showing us Samura and Yora's first meeting. Now, the first thing that you should notice here is the timing of Yora's arrival. Yora's meeting with Samura coincided with Inori's wake. A moment where, as I discussed in the previous video here and the last chapter, that moment left Samura realizing the sort of error of his ways, realizing he's now got a future to look forward to, and finally becoming a man who felt he could offer not only support but also be able to hold his daughter after harboring so much guilt and resentment for himself and his actions for all those years. A man who is now looking forward to the future, as Inori had told him to. Start looking towards the future and not backwards. And he kept his word, and I want you to keep the word future in your mind, because it is very relevant throughout the entire chapter here. But Yora tells Samura he just had to thank the great hero. And from here, he dives into the history of Shukaku, the history lesson, you might say, letting us know how the Seitei War started when they invaded. The citizens of that small country were bloodthirsty savages by nature. Their bodies were resistant to that and Sekai. Now pay close attention to how Hokuzonu depicts the inhabitants of Shukaku here, and how he depicts the goons who have been used within the series so far, in the assault on the castle earlier on in the series. You see the similarities? They are both drawn to look savage. They are both drawn feral in nature. Hokuzonu also depicts the Kamiori, Tobimune, and Cloud Gouger swords here. Now, at first, we were a little bit uncertain about what that bottom sword was, but I think it is certainly Cloud Gouger. If you have any other theories in the comments down below, let me know. But Yora states how our heroes and their enchanted blades turn the tide. And Yora's language here is very telling about himself, or potentially his goals, because of his use of the word our heroes. He lets us know that this man is seemingly a native of Japan and not Shukaku, unless he is doing it to be a sly old fox. Can't rule out that possibility with Yora. But he also refers to Japan as our country, and it's this type of language that continues throughout the chapter. Thanks to our heroes, every last one of them was wiped out. Our country was protected, end quote. Yora's language here is very specific. It's very on the nose, and I believe Hokuzonu was doing this on purpose. I'll talk more about the text and how stuff is being presented within this chapter a little bit later. But Yora also reveals that he knows the truth of what happened, and he knows the events that led up to the eradication, the story the public doesn't know. And it's more than likely Chihiro also doesn't know the side of the events, which again we will talk about later down the line, because there is a small piece of information that gets casually dropped in this series. But Yora continues to explain how once the Shinoichi emerged, it turned the tables on the enemy. We waged a powerful counter-offensive, rapidly driving them back. Again, he said we waged a powerful counter-offensive. The heroes encroached into enemy territory, and at this point the end of the war was in sight and the enemy flew the white flag. Yora also mentions how they were taught to call them bloodthirsty savages from our textbooks. This leans back into what Chihiro had discussed with Iori a few chapters back. The way Chihiro describes the events seems very much like propaganda from the Kaminabi, and it seems, if you were on that train of thought, you were most likely right here, because Yora also confirms that the inhabitants of Shukaku weren't just bloodthirsty savages. There was regular human beings on the island too, just like me and you. Well, maybe not you. Definitely not you picking your nose right now. That's a bit strange. Anyway, like and subscribe, by the way. But anyways, Yora explains how physiologically that small nation's inhabitants had a unique genetic resistance to the Dekai, but they were still human. And we're shown a child hugging their parents in fear, and it's mentioned how the royal family who led this invasion chose to surrender and signed a peace treaty. But that's where things went wrong. But the wording here is very specific. It lets us know about Shukaku, despite what the propaganda may tell us and what we may have been shown so far. These were normal people. They had a culture, they had a royal family, they had heritage and history, and that's now all gone. All because one of these heroes, who had trod over countless corpses during this war, went berserk. Now, for the first time, Hokuzono treats us to the full face of the Shinoichi wielder, the sword master. Now, there's something that I love about how Hokuzono has depicted this man. Not only is he just visually menacing, black eyes, covered in blood, messy hair, and a bloodlust that just seeps through the pages, it's also how Hokuzono drew him. He drew him specifically different to everyone else within this chapter, with multiple lines to illustrate the chaos that this man stands for. For comparison, just look at how Samura is drawn. It's completely different. One stands out with clean line work and crisp detailing, and the other is a mess of lines and chicken scratches to emphasize that this man is chaotic and brutal in nature. And it's these little details that I just love with Hokuzono. I just love this kind of stuff. It's how he portrays his character. He's telling a story not only through words but through the medium of art and the paneling that he does himself. That's something I really appreciate. As I mentioned many times, reading the series is kind of like watching a storyboard for a film play out in real time. However, with the Swordmaster going berserk, the strongest of the enchanted blades responded. The true realm of the enchanted blade conforms to its master, and this was something that Hokuzono established very early on in the series with Chihiro and Sojo's fight, because that fight wasn't just a clash of ideas about what it meant to wield the enchanted blade, it was also a clash of ideas where they both realized that these blades will warp to the masters and vice versa, and we see a lot more of that within this chapter. Gouger ended up attuning to Sojo's will and enabled him to maintain slaughter, or attain slaughter should I say, and later down the line, that same Cloud Gouger ended up straining itself in order to help Chihiro. But the true realm from the Shinoichi is Malediction. Now, if you don't know the meaning of that word, allow me to educate you for a moment. Malediction, a magical word or phrase uttered with the intention of bringing about evil, a curse. If that word and its descriptor doesn't do it for you, allow Hokuzono's imagery to do the rest of the work for you that I can't describe, because we finally get to see a showcase of the island of Shukaku, completely and utterly decimated. Skulls, flowers, centipedes, butterflies, and destruction litters the lands, and it's confirmed that the abilities that the Swordmaster evoked were a force of pure obliteration. A force that we've yet only seen play out of a smither, a fraction of it. We have still yet to find out just what it is that this sword can do in the hands of the Swordmaster. The immensity of that power the Shinoichi and the Swordmaster consumed each other. Furthermore, leaning into the aspect of both sword bending to the master's will, but also vice versa, the master can also become a slave to that very power that they ended up wielding and creating. But that calamity that beset that small nation laid waste to roughly 200,000 lives. A genocide, a complete and utter genocide of the populace due to one man's sword and his will of obliteration. Whatever it is that you think you knew about the Swordmaster, just cast it all out, because Hokuzono has shown us something and someone that is just completely and utterly evil from these pictures that we've seen here, but we don't know the events that drove him to this. But Iori continues and explains how it was only after this event that the 5 remaining sword bearers were able to stop him, since the Swordmaster remains locked away, the worst murderer who ever lived. Now, to hide all of this, the Kaminabi hid the truth and enshrined the Swordmaster as a hero who defeated an evil enemy. And Samura thinks about something here. How much does he know? End quote. To me, this right here implies that there is more to the situation, and what Iori is recapping here is only a brief summary of the Seitei War. I know a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people talking about how they feel a little bit disappointed by this lore drop, but this lore drop is huge, and it does recontextualize a lot of the series. But just this little statement here from Samura lets us know that there is a bit more to what's going on here. Considering he's saying how much does he know, there's obviously events that led up to these actions, to these events in depth, that we are not privy to, as we are yet to still see all of this story unfold and see what happened on the island. What was the turning point for the Swordmaster to go berserk like this? What are perspectives of the other sword bearers? How did they all handle this? How did they react to this? What were their thoughts and feelings going into this? There are still so many moving parts to this that we are yet to see and understand completely. But to add into all of this mystery, Europe claims that he comes with a prophecy, and this is the reason for his visit. So long as the Swordmaster lives, that calamity known as the Malediction will occur again in the near future in this country. And again, there is more mentions of the future as Samura questions Yora. He leaves with some parting words. Seiichi Samura, you have a job to do for the future. Now, earlier I mentioned how Yora's appearance here at this time and date was no mistake, and in fact it was a very intentional and pivotal move for Yora on the chessboard here. Him showing up here at this time where Samura is now confronting his past and looking to his future and making efforts to be a dad, the dad that he should have been, and now protect his daughter. Yora chose the perfect moment, a time where Samura's emotions were high and when he was presented with an opportunity to right his past wrongs in order to protect his future. He might just actually go for this opportunity that Yora is presenting him. But it's in these panels here that the most prevalent information happens, because just as Iori opens the door one final time, Yora reminds Samura for the future. This final message has clear implications to Samura that this his future right now is Iori, and what his actions does next, what he does next, that will be what's best for her in his eyes. And Iori's emotional manipulation of Samura here is simply perfect. I genuinely can't wait for Hokuzono to show us more and more of Iori's character, his motives, to see how his mind ticks, to see what took him to this spot, to see what took him to where he is now. But it is also worth pointing out that Iori actually heard this conversation between Yora and Samura, a conversation which, due to the spell placed upon her, she would have forgotten, and now due to that very same spell being broken, she will now remember and have a frame of reference for why, or some of the reason as to why Samura left there. And by extension, she'll also be able to relay this information to Chihiro and the Masumi of this meeting, and maybe even help shed some light on Samura's actions, on what is going on, and for the first time in the series, potentially get one step ahead of Yora and his mastermind planning. Now, we are shown the Kaminabi headquarters, where we meet with the short Kaminabi dude, this old guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have a name for him here, so you can correct me in the comments here, but I don't think we have a name for this dude. But you know who we do have a name for? Today's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep are long-time friends of the channel, and they offer the best sleeper masks on the market without a doubt. As some of you might know, I recently became a dad, so as you can imagine, sleep has been and will continue to be an elusive mistress. But thanks to Manta Mask, I have been able to get some of the semblance of sleep back into my life with their ultra-comfortable blackout masks. And as for when the baby's screaming a bit too much, causing the old man a headache over here, these weighted masks have been absolutely perfect. But they offer so much more. Sound masks, which lets you listen to the beautiful sounds of whale noises or whatever it is that you listen to while you're trying to sleep. A cool mask designed to literally keep you cool. Imagine the cold side of the pillow, but on your face permanently. So use code WEEB for 10% off your order today. And once again, a massive shout out to Manta Sleep for sponsoring the channel. Long-time friends of the channel. Thank you. Anyways, it's also revealed that Samura remembers this old man from when he trained Shiba and Asami, and we are shown an image of him standing above them, with this dude instantly giving me Master Yoda vibes. Picture Yoda beating the asses of Obi-Wan and Anakin simultaneously. That's kind of the vibes that I'm getting here. But to put all of this in perspective, both Sojo and Yora recognize Shiba and Asami as elite level fighters. Yora even refers to Shiba as the pinnacle of sorcery, which really puts into perspective just how strong this old dude might actually be. Remember, old dudes in anime, they don't fuck around. They're always scary people. Regardless, Samura here is here to inform this old geezer about his visit from Yora, with Samura once again confirming that he didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize his voice, and his scent was unfamiliar. Now, this old man lets us know that the only people who could have known about the events that happened on Shukaku here are core members of the Kaminabi and the nation's highest echelon. Naturally, Hokuzono framing it this way sets in motion a complete and utter distrust for us, the audience, to any member of the Kaminabi or the higher echelons here. We are now always going to be looking out at people who might be suspicious, and it is worth pointing out that two people who were present at the treaty signing, this old man and this guy, so keep in mind these two, keep your eye on these two. They could be pivotal in the future. Now, the old man does talk about Yora's prophecy here and says it's like the dream of the monk of Tenrakuin, a possible disaster, in other words. But both Samura and the old man agree that while it is highly unlikely, it is not impossible for this disaster to come about as Yora prophesied. However, it is here where we are finally given the nitty-gritty particulars for how the internal contracts work with their blades and how they affect the story as a whole so far, and how they will affect the story going forward. The eternal contracts, these life and death spells, are immensely sophisticated. It would have been extremely cumbersome to enact multiple spells at once. For that reason, Rokuhira used the Shinoichi as its core and assigned it to the Swordmaster, his most trusted ally. And it's this little line right here that is just casually thrown into the dialogue. It reminded me so much of Attack on Titan at chapter 42, the scene where Reina and Bertolt reveal themselves. The text is treated so casually. Compare these two reveals next to the text of the Swordmaster. The focus is on the text to show how evil he is, but here, this reveal is casually just thrown into the chapter so nonchalantly, and it's this information that could fundamentally change Chihiro, his quest, his meaning of life, all in one fell swoop if he learns this information. If Chihiro was to learn of his dad's actions and his dad's creation, and that they were the things that enabled the worst murder in all of Japanese history to come into fruition, how would he respond? Chihiro's quest throughout this story has been to avenge his dad and to stop evildoers and protect the weak. But what happens when Chihiro figures out that his father is complicit in the events that sent 200,000 souls to their graves as a result of his own creation? And it's for this little reason alone that Hokuzono has my balls on the vice, because this tiny little detail was so casually dropped locked inside of a big reveal for a major mechanic of how the power system works with the Eternal contracts. However, alongside this, Hokuzono does let us know just how these Eternal contracts work, and thus continues to recontextualize the story even further. Because of the configuration of the Eternal contracts, if the Swordmaster at the nucleus dies, the bodies of the other linked swordbearers will deteriorate within days and they too will perish. End quote. This piece of information changes a lot. A unique dynamic is formed right here, because if the Swordmaster dies, so too does every other swordbearer, all except for Chihiro, which we will swing back around to that in a second, because Samura's goal here with the Hishaku right now is to kill the swordbearers, kill the Swordmaster, and the first one to drop was in fact Yoji. The second one was actually Chihiro, but Chihiro's death was unique because he came back to life shortly after his death, and Shiba theorized that Samura's goal was to either let Shiba know he can and will kill Chihiro at will if he needs to, or to sever Chihiro's eternal contract with Enten and stop his quest for vengeance. Now, this is something that made everyone question Yoji's death. Even the characters within the series, within the story, have fully to confirm whether he is dead or not. But given the fact that Chihiro's death severed ties to Enten, it does so to mean that Yoji's eternal contract is also severed. As we know, his blade has now gone to Hirohiko, meaning Samura may have indirectly saved Uraha Yoji somehow without actually having to kill him. But you might also be thinking, what if the Swordmaster dies? So too does Chihiro, right? But this isn't quite correct, because at the time of the blade's creation, Enten wasn't even created, meaning Chihiro is not included within that stipulation of death should the Swordmaster die. He's not included within that eternal contract, but it does raise questions as to the conditions of Chihiro's eternal contract. And if I may offer some theories, I personally believe that he may be the only person to be able to wield all of the enchanted blades, but also the only person to break the blades. You see, because at one point Chihiro was also in an eternal contract with Enten currently, and then he was also still in an eternal contract with Cloud Gouger. Even though Cloud Gouger was broken, he was still in an eternal contract with two of those blades, and we saw him actually shatter Cloud Gouger itself, and Enten itself may well be the final sword created by Rokuhira in an attempt for him to right his wrongs and atone for his sins. But this chapter starts coming to a close with Samura and the old man continuing their conversation. Samura needn't sacrifice himself over such slim odds, telling Samura to let them handle the rest, and once again telling Samura to look forward to the future with his daughter. Now we switch back to the dojo here, and we get to see the progression of Iori over the past year and how she is progressing with the EI white sword style, a style that she is mastering at an incredible pace, even disarming one of the students within the series here. And we also get lore as to why Iori keeps her eyes closed, and it's because she's constantly mimicking her dad. She's constantly imitating him, with Samura explaining her ability to do this helps her eliminate extraneous thoughts, and she can quietly concentrate on focusing and wielding the blade itself. Now, by the end of the chapter, Iori vows to be the best fighter ever and protect her, which in and of itself is as if Hokuzono is bringing Iori back full circle in an effort to recreate a better and more wholesome version of Samura himself. Now, Hokuzono over these past two chapters has done nothing but just amaze me with his work. Considering he's such a young writer, everything that he's done has been incredible within this series, and he truly does deserve this week break, and I am very excited to see him come back in a week's time. But that is everything from me. Once again, massive shout out to Man to Sleep sponsoring the video. If you've not already, consider liking and subscribing. Go get yourself a Manta mask, and if you want to support the channel further, consider becoming a member to the channel. But as always, I will catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.